Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and you're probably wondering to yourself, when is Joe going to talk about Martavis Bryant? And that's true. In this day and age of these slow off-season happenings, this was a big bombshell that dropped over the weekend, and I was in denial and didn't want to believe it. And that's part of the reason I didn't want to comment on it. The other reason is that I just don't like to jump on a bandwagon and start making assumptions, start name-calling, and let otherwise irrational, emotional feelings overcome my conscience when it comes to a player or a person that may have potential problems or does have problems, albeit mental, physical, substance, whatever be the case. And you know, that really is a personal decision when you break it down for Martavis Bryant to do what he wants. Am I disappointed? I am. I think he makes a difference on this team. But as you heard in a not as remorseful statement from the Pittsburgh Steelers, it appears they know and were ready and prepared to possibly move on. And now that's a certain possibility, as Martavis Bryant is going to be sitting out a lot more than the 4 games he missed last season. He's going to miss an entire year. And for those that aren't up on the NFL wellness or substance abuse policies that exist, we jumped from a 4-game suspension to a full year. And I think the full year comes because there's probably more of this Bryant story than what we actually know or have heard, because it just doesn't jump from 4 games to a full season now. For those of you who have to live within the miserable confines and boundaries of Cleveland Browns territory, as I do, you constantly hear about or heard about Josh Gordon. And Josh Gordon was suspended indefinitely, and pretty much Martavis Bryant is Josh Gordon 2.0, if you look at it this way. Same amount of trouble or inability to take and or pass drug tests. And Josh Gordon got a pass last year because they changed the rules. And he's gone. Out of the league indefinitely. So we're not going to see Martavis Bryant anymore. Just like Josh Gordon would have to be reinstated in the league as well. And it's just an ever-growing trend of players who aren't following league rules. And I know that there's some people out there that want to point out that marijuana is prohibition or marijuana is legalized in some areas, but this is an employer. This is a private institution that makes standards of which you have to follow. I once worked for an employer that wouldn't allow me to wear earrings. I was not even allowed to wear small spacers to keep the hole from closing in my ear. Do I continue to defy my employer and lose my job? Or do I follow suit and keep my job? And that's what it's basically boiling down to. And I'm already far off the reservation of where I wanted to be with this podcast, because I actually want to talk about what it's going to take as we move on from Martavis Bryant, as I move on from talking about Martavis Bryant, and the Pittsburgh Steelers look to replace their, I don't want to say star wide receiver, but he was getting there. And I think the Steelers, there's 3 options, and one of them is a complete hypothetical. It's kind of funny, and I'm only bringing it up because it came up over the weekend. And so we're going to talk about Darius Bay, who many speculate was signed with the Steelers already having some advanced knowledge that Martavis Bryant would be punished under this policy. And we're wondering, Darius Bay, former first-round pick, I think 9th overall from the Oakland Raiders, he didn't have a really good time in Oakland. And if you look at all the different quarterbacks that he played for, I mean, who can blame him? Now, you're going to question the guy's hands or ability, or I'm going to tell you, we've heard this before. Okay, 21 catches, 314 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. That's the numbers with Darius Henderson. And you're thinking, how does a guy like this, who did admirably come in and fill in for Martavis Bryant, how does he up his game? And to the same extent, another guy that's already on the Steelers roster, Sammy Coates, last year's third-round pick, who rode the bench all year long, had 3 catches the entire season, including 2 of those in the playoffs against the Denver Broncos. He came in basically cold and only playing in practices, comes in a game and shows us a little bit of flash. He had a 37-yard reception in that game, and there might be something there. There's not enough of a sample size to know. But I could give you enough of a sample size of when we also didn't know about players that were on the Steelers roster. We were uncertain at one time about losing Emmanuel Sanders, and we were uncertain about losing Jericho Cotchery, and we lost them both in the same year a few years ago. I know what you're thinking. Wow, hey, you know what? I forgot about that. You know, it's easy to forget. Emmanuel Sanders, coming off of being a rookie, also, it was a 3rd or 4th round pick. I'd have to go look. I don't have that in front of me, but I do have his numbers. And in his 4 years in Pittsburgh, the first 3 had 28 catches, 22 catches, and 44 catches. And you look at that and you say 28 and 22, that's about the same type of production as a Darius Henderson, because Emmanuel Sanders wasn't a wide receiver 1. In his final year in Pittsburgh, before he cashed in and got on the Denver Broncos, Peyton Manning, whatever you want to call a juggernaut offense, 67 receptions, 740 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Not a 1,000-yard wide receiver, nor was Martavis Bryant. Still in that 60-some catch area, and 6 touchdowns. So, you think that Darius Henderson or Sammy Coates could match that in 16 games? I think they could. I think the Steelers have been rotating people in and out. They did it with Jericho Cotchery. Remember, the sky was falling that we lost Jericho Cotchery, who had 10 touchdowns in his last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, before moving on to the Carolina Panthers, who were in the Super Bowl last year. And coming back around to Cotchery's final year before he left for Carolina, he had 10 touchdowns, but he's only had 4 since in 29 games with Carolina. 29 games. I'm sorry, that's 29 regular season games, not including the playoffs that they were in over the last 2 years. And with the Super Bowl, 4 touchdowns. So he fell off a cliff after having 46 catches, 602 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns his final year in Pittsburgh, but was preceded with 2 seasons that had 16 and 17 grabs. Now, that's not to diminish that Jericho Cotchery was a clutch player when relied upon. But I also believe that if you are going to put the onus on DHB or Sammy Coates to step up to be that guy, and we don't know, there could be another draft pick down the pike here coming at the end of next month's draft, where the Steelers might look for another player who could potentially step up and be every bit as that player that Antonio Brown grew into, or Emmanuel Sanders grew into, or Martavis Bryant grew into, or perhaps Sammy Coates will grow into. And maybe Darius Henderson is in the right situation because now he has Ben Roethlisberger throwing the ball to him. But let's just say, in theory, and this little bird was speaking over the weekend, let's say in theory the Steelers wanted to turn to another one of their former players. And no, I'm not talking about Mike Wallace because he signed with the Baltimore Ravens, and nor would I want Mike Wallace. And no, I'm not talking about Santonio Holmes or Plaxico Burress. They're well beyond, that ship is sailed when it comes to their NFL career. Just Father Time catches up with you. Has Father Time caught up with Hines Ward? Or is he getting old and senile to think and suggest he would come out of retirement to play in the NFL for the first time since 2011? 5 years later, Hines Ward, who just turned 40 years old and had not caught or had not had more than 1,000 yards receiving since 2009. So he had played in 2010 and 2011 and did not have 1,000 yards as he was basically phased out of the offense. Can a 40-year-old Hines Ward offer anything to the Pittsburgh Steelers? And immediately when you hear something like Hines Ward being serious about, hey, give me a call and I would be willing to put on the pads and help out your team, everyone gets emotional and everyone gets nostalgic and thinks, that would be awesome. Hines Ward's coming back or going to the Super Bowl. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what the track record is of 40-year-old, any position in the NFL. I mean, you got Adam Vinatieri out there at 43 years old with a new contract kicking for the Colts. There aren't very many Adam Vinatieris. Or on that same team, Matt Hasselbeck. What is he, 40, 41 years old? He didn't have much of a glamorous season. You don't really get up to your late 30s and early 40s and make a go of it in the NFL. It is just not that type of sport where there's that type of longevity. Nor is there really any sport where 40-year-olds are just killing it. That said, does Hines Ward offer something as a bench player, a role player, a situational player, a veteran leader, an experienced athlete that the Steelers would be willing to reach out and see if his services would be available? It's a very interesting topic, and it's not one that I think is necessarily where Pittsburgh has to push the panic button due to the happenings with Martavis Bryant. But Hines Ward's out there, and he may have a little bit left to offer. It's just something to think about. However, the Pittsburgh Steelers already have 2 more capable hands and 4 total wide receivers on the roster, with Antonio Brown and Marcus Wheating adding to Darius Heyward-Bey and Sammy Coates. Brown and Wheaton are definitely starters, and I think Heyward-Bey and Coates are going to vie for that 3rd spot and maybe even trade off. Heyward-Bey may even hand the baton to Coates. And for that reason, I don't think there's any reason the Steelers need to make any type of drastic phone call to the Hines Ward hotline, punch in 86, and bring him back on the roster. But stranger things have happened. Never say never in today's NFL.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.